In June of 2014, a 92-year-old man died in Brattleboro, Vermont. He had pumped gas at a service station for about 25 years. Then he swept floors as a part-time janitor at a JCPenney for another 17. He drove a second-hand Toyota Yaris. He heated his house with wood he gathered himself off the ground, branch by branch. His coat was sometimes held together with a safety pin. When his attorney opened his safe deposit box, she found a stack of stock certificates 5 inches thick. 95 companies. Most of them held for decades. Ronald Reed was worth around $8 million. His own stepson said he'd had no idea. Neither had the town. Last time on this channel, we watched $300 million disappear. A man who earned more in a night than most people earn in a decade and filed for bankruptcy anyway. This is the same country, the same market, the same arithmetic, running backwards. A janitor's paycheck, and $8 million at the end of it. The 4 patterns that took Tyson's fortune apart are all here again, just inverted. The first pattern is the easiest to describe and the hardest to do. Ronald Reed's life did not change, not once, not gradually. The flannel shirts, the wood stove, the coffee shop breakfast were the same at 92 as they had been at 40. And crucially, they were the same after the portfolio was worth millions, as they were when it was worth nothing. His attorney described visits where he parked blocks away from her office so he wouldn't have to feed a parking meter. He was at the time a multimillionaire, saving coins. Now put that beside the pattern that emptied Tyson. Spending is not a number, it's a percentage. It expands to fill whatever comes in. Reed never boarded that escalator. Not because he white-knuckled his way past temptation every day for 60 years, but because he never took the first step up. There was no first upgrade, so there was no new baseline, so there was never a next upgrade required to feel the same. That's the mechanism people miss when they call this discipline. It isn't willpower. It's the absence of a starting move. The gap between what he earned and what he spent stayed open his entire adult life. Everything else in this video is just what happens inside that gap. Second pattern, he converted it into ownership, and then he stopped. 95 companies, held in most cases for decades. Physical certificates in a bank box, not a screen, not an app, not a balance he could check on the way to the bathroom at 3 a.m. Think about what that friction did. Selling meant driving to the bank, opening the box, handling paper. Every convenience that modern investing has proudly eliminated is a convenience that makes it easier to sell. His portfolio was inconvenient, and the inconvenience was worth money. The pattern that killed the athletes we looked at last time was money as a flow, a river that felt infinite while it ran and left nothing behind when it stopped. Reed's money was a stock. It arrived, it turned into a share of a company, and it stopped moving. He wasn't rich because his paycheck was large. He was rich because his paycheck stopped somewhere. Third pattern, and this is where the fairy tale version of this story usually goes wrong. People hear janitor with 95 stocks and picture a hidden genius, some savant quietly outpicking Wall Street from behind a mop. That's the version that gets shared, and it isn't really what the record shows. What the record shows is a man who read the Wall Street Journal every day and bought boring companies that paid dividends, blue chips, household names, and this is the important part. He deliberately avoided businesses he didn't understand, technology in particular, during exactly the decades when technology was the most exciting thing on earth. Sit with how unimpressive that is. He wasn't finding the winners. He was eliminating the ways to lose, and then waiting an extraordinarily long time. Because the other input here is one nobody can shortcut. He was born in 1921. He came home from the war in 1945. He bought his first shares as a young man and was still holding some of them in his 90s. That's not an investing career, that's a lifetime. Dividends coming in, buying more shares, which paid more dividends for something like 6 decades. Nothing he did in any single year would have made a video. What made him rich was that nothing he did in any single year was a disaster, 60 years in a row. The fourth pattern is the one that actually explains the other 3. Nobody knew. Not the town, not his friends, not his family. He was, by every account, a private and unassuming man, and the fortune surfaced only when the bequests did, after he died. And here's the detail that says everything. Reed ate breakfast at a local coffee shop, by his lawyer's account, close to his only indulgence. One morning, he went to pay and found someone had already covered his bill. They'd assumed he couldn't afford it. He was worth millions of dollars. He let it stand. Compare that to the pattern we ended on last time. Money as a language, spent to prove something to an audience, that you made it, that you didn't forget anyone, that you're somebody now. Every dollar spent saying that is a dollar that leaves. Reed's money was never asked to say anything to anyone, so it never had to leave. That's the part that isn't a technique, and it's why this is so much rarer than it sounds. Staying invisible while quietly becoming rich means accepting every single day for decades that people will look at your coat and draw a conclusion, and letting them. Now, this channel doesn't do fairy tales, so let's put the obvious objection on the table. He lived on almost nothing for 92 years and died with $8 million he never spent on himself. A reasonable person can look at that and ask whether he won at all, whether that's wealth or just a very long habit of denial. The safety-pinned coat is either the most disciplined thing you've ever heard or the saddest. And I'd say, honestly, it depends entirely on whether he enjoyed his life. He left about $4.8 million to the local hospital and $1.2 million to the town library, the largest gifts either institution had ever received. The library used part of it to extend its hours and renovate a building that was half a century old. He also left an antique phonograph to the local historical society. So the fortune bought something after all. It just wasn't a car, and he wasn't in the room when it happened. Whether you'd take that trade is genuinely up to you. What isn't up for debate is the machinery underneath it, and the machinery works at any income. Go back to the coffee shop. A man walks in wearing a coat with a safety pin in it. Somebody looks at him, does the math in their head, and decides, kindly, generously, without a shred of malice, that he probably can't afford his own breakfast. They were wrong by $8 million. That is what this whole thing looks like from the outside. There is no visible version of it. The paycheck that stopped somewhere, the 6 decades of not losing, the money that never had to prove anything, none of it shows up in a room. It only shows up at the end. $300 million in, nothing out. A janitor's wage in, $8 million out. Same country, same market, same decades, roughly. The variable was never the income. It never has been. Next time, the opposite failure, not the people who lost the money, but the people who had it and let it go early. The man who owned 10% of Apple and sold it in 1976 for $800. The psychology of selling too soon.